Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @symbol CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @symbol CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 14th of August 2024. From the news section. Elderly woman hit by car in Dalkeith Tesco car park. This article was written by Jodie Harrison and it's being read by me, Corey. An elderly woman has been taken to hospital after she was hit by a vehicle in a supermarket car park. The 79-year-old was crossing the Tesco car park at Harden Green, Dalkeith, when she was struck by a white car at around 2:40 p.m. on Monday, police said. The woman was taken to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary for treatment, where medical staff described her condition as serious but stable. Police are appealing for information about the incident in the Midlothian town. Sergeant Jen Nevin said, "Inquiries are ongoing to establish the full circumstances surrounding this collision, and we are appealing for any potential witnesses to come forward. The car park would have been busy around the time, and we would urge anyone that saw what happened or who may have dashcam footage to please get in touch. Anyone with information is asked to contact Police Scotland on 101, quoting incident number 1959 of Monday, August 12, 2024. Again, if you have any information that could help with this investigation, please contact Police Scotland on 101, quoting incident number 1959 of Monday, August 12, 2024. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey. The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 14th of August 2024. From the news section. Police Scotland put former station in town up for sale. This article was written by Ian McConnell, and it's being read by me, Corey. A former police station in a Scottish town has been put up for sale, with offers over £90,000 sought. The sale, the latest in a series of disposals by Police Scotland, is being billed as an attractive development opportunity. Police Scotland have instructed Shepherd Chartered Surveyors to set a closing date of August 21st at noon for offers on the former Carluke Police Station. Detailing the particulars, Shepherd said, "The accommodation comprises front reception, control room, offices, kitchen, breakout area, storage rooms and locker rooms, incorporating toilet and shower facilities at ground floor, while the first floor features 3 offices and a bathroom incorporating a WC, wash-hand basin and shower." Calvin Molinari, agency surveyor at Shepherd, said, "The disposal of the former Carluke Police Station offers an attractive development opportunity. Carluke Police Station marks the next in a series of disposals of Police Scotland properties across the country as part of a wider strategy advised jointly by Shepherd and BNP Paribas Real Estate." He added, "We are delighted to be involved in various disposals on behalf of Police Scotland, including a notable Alloa Police Station as well as the Pleasance Police Box in Edinburgh." Shepherd said the former police station, with single-storey projection to the rear, together with a garden area and private off-street car park to the front, is a part single, part two-storey end terrace property, with the outbuilding situated on an irregular-shaped site. It's noted that Carluke, in the South Lanarkshire Council area, 5 miles northwest of Lanark and 4 miles southwest of Wishaw, benefits from frequent direct rail services to Lanark, Motherwell, Hamilton and Glasgow. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Ian McConnell, and it was read by me, Corey.
From the Herald, Wednesday the 14th of August. Sports section. Aberdeen star Majowski to sign 4-year deal at Champions League club. And the article is by Robbie Hanratty, and it's read by Ross. Aberdeen have finalised a £6.8 million transfer agreement to sell Bjorn Majowski to Girona, making a significant move for the North Macedonian international. Majowski's representatives have successfully negotiated a 4-year contract with the La Liga club, enhancing his prospects in one of Europe's top leagues while providing him the opportunity to compete in the UEFA Champions League. Following completion of the agreement between the two clubs, Majowski has received clearance to travel to Spain, where he will undergo a medical examination as part of the final steps of the transfer process. The deal, which will see Pittodrie side bank around $4.26 million upfront with potential for a further $2.5 million in add-ons, as well as a portion of any future sell-on fee, represents a substantial financial gain for Aberdeen, as Majowski was originally acquired by the Dons for just $600,000 from Hungarian outfit MTK Budapest 2 years ago. During his time at Aberdeen, Majowski emerged as a key player, showcasing his scoring ability and contributing significantly to the team's attacking efforts. The 25-year-old netted 44 times from 90 outings, including important strikes in the UEFA Conference League and domestic cup competitions. His move to Girona not only highlights his growth as a player, but also underscores the strategic acumen of Aberdeen's management in identifying the developing talent. The feeling's also mutual between the Dons supporters and the prolific goalscorer after thousands stayed behind following the 3-1 Scottish Premiership victory over St Mirren on Sunday to play an emotional farewell to the Aberdeen talesman. Majowski's good friend and well-known barber to many of Jimmy Thellon's squad, Tam Pompadour, praised the striker for earning his dream move whilst revealing more details around the transfer. Writing on Instagram, he said, "Excited to see my close friend embark on the next step of his journey in joining Girona in one of the best leagues in the world, La Liga. Your dream of Champions League football has come true as you sign a 4-year deal. Your Scotland experience has now ended, the highs and lows experienced and, of course, the undying love of the Aberdeen fans, which you will be internally always grateful. As one door closes another one opens, but the desire and want to succeed to become the best you can this time in Spain. Girona, who are owned by the City Football Group, fended off interest from Genoa and Southampton from Majowski's services, and it remains to be seen if the deal will be finalised in time for him to feature against Real Betis on Thursday evening, or if he will have to wait until they visit Atletico Madrid on August the 25th to make his debut. And that article was read by Robbie Hanratty. From the Herald, Wednesday the 14th of August, Sports section. Former Celtic star announced as Match of the Day pundit for a new season, by Robbie Hanratty, read by Ross. Following a triumphant season with Celtic, where he played a key role in securing a Scottish Premiership and Scottish Cup double, former England goalkeeper Joe Hart is set to take on a new challenge. After hanging up his gloves this summer, the 37-year-old will now become a studio pundit for Match of the Day throughout the 2024-25 season. Hart earned 75 caps for the England national team and was part of BBC Sports coverage during his country's run at the Euro 2024 final this summer. With 340 appearances in the English Premier League and a legacy that includes 2 league titles, an FA Cup and 2 League Cups with Manchester City, Hart is poised to bring valuable insights and experience to the new role in sports commentary. I'm very excited, very proud, and looking forward to growing into an incredible role on something that I grew up watching, Hart said about joining the world's most iconic football highlight show. I want to try and give back as much as I can from the career I've had and keep learning. I'm thrilled to be in and around an incredible setup, learning first and foremost in a new part of my life. Match of the Day has stood the test of time. It's never stood still. It's always trying to grow and always trying to build and always trying to bring the game to its viewers in any way it can. And that article was by Robbie Henratty. From the Herald, Wednesday the 14th of August. Sports section. Rangers captain reveals referee's explanation for Hefe red card, by Matthew Lindsay. Read by Ross. Rangers captain James Tavernier tonight revealed that Italian referee Marco Guida sent off Ibrox winger Hefe in the Champions League qualifying defeat to Dynamo Kiev because he thought he had elbowed his opponent in the face. Tavernier was astonished when the match official showed the Brazilian a second yellow card in the second half of the third qualifying round double-header at Hampden when the score was 0-0. He felt the summer signing didn't even deserve to have a foul awarded against him following an innocuous coming together with Alexander Karaviv just outside the visitors' penalty area. Television replays showed that Hefe had not elbowed the forward, but referees are not allowed to use the VAR to overturn yellow cards. I spoke to him, the referee, as it happened, said Tavernier. He explained that it was an elbow in the face. Looking back at it during the game, he gets up really early. I thought it wasn't even a free kick. I thought he got up early. There's no malice to what he's done. It's a 50-50 ball that's going up in the air. Hefe gets up really early. He beats him in the air. I don't know much contact there is. Obviously, that makes a big difference. It's obviously disappointing to not get the chance to go to the next round and try to play a third game to go into the Champions League. We're obviously still in Europe, the Europa League, but during the game the decision changes the whole dynamics of the game. Even with 10 men, we'll still try to push as much as we can and limit them as much as we can. As the game is getting on, we're pushing more and leaving opportunities for them. We had great opportunities, but we weren't as clinical as we wanted to be. We kept on asking the question. It's obviously a tough moment trying to go against 11 men. We tried to give it to 11 men. We tried to leave everything out on the pitch. It's just disappointing for all the lads that we couldn't make it happen. He added, we'll obviously look back at this and we have to brush it off quickly. We've got another game at the weekend. There's no time to mourn on this. We'll look at the lessons that we can take from it. Then we'll brush ourselves off and we've got to go again. We all wanted to send the fans home happy tonight and get into the next round. It's small details in games that obviously make a massive impact. We need to look back on it, how we played, be critical of ourselves. And that article was by Matthew Lindsay.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 14th of August 2024 from the Voices section. Good news for those keen to see Scottish economy flourish. This article is by Ian McConnell. There was much to be cheerful about from a Scottish perspective in Royal Bank of Scotland's latest growth tracker report published this week. Scotland's performance was not stellar, and the nation was not as high in the UK league table as it has been in the recent past. However, it was firmly in the top half of the table of UK nations and regions when it came to growth of the private sector economy in July. This was most encouraging after a sharp slowdown in expansion in June, which came as a bit of a surprise given the broadly consistent relative strength of the Scottish economy in a UK context in recent times in the Royal Bank survey. Furthermore, Scotland's progress on several other key measures was also good news, at least from the viewpoint of anyone who wants to see the nation flourish, with all that means for living standards. That said, we should bear in mind that the idea of Scotland prospering seems to be anathema for some hidebound by political views. There was a rise in optimism among Scottish companies in July about the prospects for increased activity on a 12-month horizon, the survey revealed. And increases in confidence were recorded in both the services and manufacturing sectors north of the border. The improvement in optimism in manufacturing was perhaps particularly welcome, given this sector recorded another decline in activity in July. Manufacturers, and particularly exporters, have of course not had their troubles to seek in recent years because of the loss of frictionless trade with the UK's largest trading partner, the European Union, and broader European Economic Area. Many manufacturers have also reported that the loss of free movement of people between the UK and EEA has fueled skills and labour shortages. Of course, it is important to note the loss of this valuable source of labour has also hit services providers in Scotland and, of course, in the UK as a whole. Scotland's hospitality sector, for example, has consistently highlighted the difficulties created by Brexit. The Royal Bank tracker also shows a renewed upturn in new business inflows for Scotland's private sector, and it signals the private sector economy north of the border last month enjoyed an acceleration in employment growth. The Royal Bank survey shows Scottish private sector growth accelerated in July, with the country ranking 5th among the 12 UK nations and regions. The headline Business Activity Index for Scotland rose to 52.7 last month, from 51.9 in June on a seasonally adjusted basis, coming in above the level of 50 deemed to separate growth from contraction for a 7th consecutive month. This run of overall private sector growth is a significant achievement given the dismal UK economic backdrop. We should bear in mind that, on the basis of official data, the UK economy fell into recession in the final 3 months of last year. While it emerged from recession in the first quarter, the UK economic picture has in recent times essentially been one of protracted stagnation. Only Northern Ireland, South West England, London and South East England recorded stronger private sector growth than Scotland in July, according to the Royal Bank Growth Tracker. Of course, the economy in Scotland is not firing on all cylinders, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, given the UK's economic predicament. The UK economy has been hit hard for so many years by the Tories' ill-judged austerity, which we should recognise is an ongoing thing, and a key driver of poverty for millions of households, not just those out of work, but also for many in employment. Also weighing down the UK economy is the enormous and ongoing damage from Brexit. And while other countries have also suffered from surging prices in recent years, the UK's inflation crisis was so much worse than that in so many nations. Brexit, of course, played a key part in exacerbating the UK's woe on that front. The road ahead looks challenging for the economy in Scotland and the UK as a whole. The main levers which could stimulate growth are, of course, at Westminster. The Scottish Government, though its economic development strategies can play a part in maximising inward investment, and Scotland has done rather well on this front in recent years. However, the big economic levers are not devolved. Labour, while its attempt to boost house building and its plan to improve employment rights after so many years of Tory rule are both welcome, has not come up with anything that would suggest it can deliver a meaningful boost to UK growth. In fact, it has hemmed itself in on two key fronts. It has shunned rejoining the European single market, something that would, if it were achieved, provide an enormous boost to growth. Labour has also pledged to stick to the Tory fiscal rules, limiting its capacity to stimulate growth through investment and thereby boost tax revenues. This backdrop, while somewhat dismal, makes it all the more encouraging that Scotland's private sector economy is doing okay in difficult circumstances. The sharp decline in private sector growth in Scotland in June was most unwelcome. However, publishing this week's growth tracker, Royal Bank noted the latest business activity index reading for Scotland signalled a solid start to the third quarter. Judith Cruikshank, who chairs Royal Bank Scotland's board, said the Scottish private sector signalled a solid start to the second half of the year, backed up by a strongly performing service sector. Moreover, optimism towards the year-end outlook was firmly optimistic as confidence levels strengthened on the month. Private sector employment also ticked up in July, the rate of job creation quickening from June. It should be noted that the rate of employment growth in Scotland in July slipped below the UK average for the first time in 12 months, even though it strengthened. However, this fact also highlights how consistently strong employment growth in Scotland was in a UK context in the 12 months prior to July. And the advances by the Scottish private sector last month, in terms of the acceleration of growth, the increase in optimism, the renewed upturn in new business inflows, and the faster rate of increase in employment, are surely positives. That article was by Ian McConnell.
This article is from the Herald on Thursday, the 15th of August 2024. It is in the Voices section and the headline is, Does Labour have the guts to be honest about immigration? And the report is by Rebecca McQuillan. When you're a frequent visitor to the south of England from Scotland, you notice certain things. There's a lot more traffic. You can grow tomatoes and figs outside in summer. The stack of Daily Mails in the newsagents is measured in feet, not inches. And people do seem to talk an awful lot about immigration. When we were there recently, it came up repeatedly in conversations we were having or overhearing on the beach or in cafes. The problems with the Rwanda scheme, the small boats, the impact on public services, the small boats, how the Tories got it wrong, the small boats. Understandably, there is more concern about irregular channel crossings on the south coast than Scotland, but there are also startling misconceptions about it. One person we spoke to was under the impression that the record-high net migration figure of 685,000 last year was down to hundreds of thousands of people crossing the channel on dinghies. In fact, the vast majority came on work and study visas, encouraged by the British government. Some 31,000 came in small boats during the year ending March 2024, which is a significant number, but a truly tiny proportion of the total, less than 5%. It's not surprising people think there's been an invasion across the channel though, is it? Because that's the word the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman used. For the last 5 years, Britain has been governed by a party that has cynically whipped up hysteria about the small boats for purely political ends, using inflammatory words like swarm and promoting disgraceful ideas like pushing back fragile, overcrowded migrant boats towards France. The fiasco of the Rwanda scheme, with all those millions wasted, was a giant exercise in distraction, an attempt to make out that the real problem was illegals coming over from France, while knowing full well that the immigration figures were really made up of desperately needed doctors, nurses, care workers and their families, and overseas students willing to pay high fees to prop up university finances and subsidise British students' fees. Do you remember Suella Braverman ever talking about that? Or Rishi Sunak describing how immigration would boost the economy and give him much-needed fiscal headroom so he could spend more on services? No, me neither. Foreign dollars, rupees and yuan help uphold British universities' competitive edge and contribute a net benefit of £37.4 billion to the UK economy on Universities UK figures. To her credit, UK Education Secretary Gillian Keegan did argue that point, and ministers knew it full well. In private, they facilitated ongoing immigration because they knew the economy needed it, but in public, they bayed about it relentlessly, and small boats in particular. Ministers and MPs set out to give the outrageously misleading impression that these vulnerable, dispossessed people were to blame for high immigration levels. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel famously said that the majority of those coming across the Channel were economic migrants, not genuine refugees. But it wasn't true then, and it isn't now. The vast majority apply for asylum, and 3/4 of them get it. They risk their lives to come by sea because the British government has made it impossible to apply for asylum in Britain from outside the country and closed all other means of getting here. Certain newspapers and broadcasters have done their best to put the record straight on all of this, but it's hardly surprising that their efforts have failed to cut through against a populist anti-immigration barrage led for years by members of the actual government. But Labour has so far failed to deal honestly with the public about immigration either. Labour also devotes most of its immigration plan to the 4.5% of immigrants who come across the Channel. It has a plan to improve skills among UK workers so recruitment from overseas is not required, but puts no timescale on that and does not explain how skills shortages are to be dealt with right now. It insists it wants to slash immigration, but doesn't say how it will square that with its top priorities of economic growth and improving public services, when the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility points to higher GDP and billions more in tax revenue due to immigration. Like the Tories, the Labour leadership has failed completely to make the arguments for why some immigration is actually a good thing. None of this is to say that people aren't right to be worried about net migration after it reached 685,000 a year, the size of Edinburgh's population. Numbers are not expected to fall much below 350,000 a year over the next 5 years. When there is a nationwide housing shortage and nearly every public service is struggling for cash and staff, the logistics of managing immigration at this level is a worry. But if it were simple to just cut it without damaging the NHS and the economy, the Tories, even the buffoons we've had since 2019, would have done it. But it isn't. They know it, we know it. So it's time the public debate reflected that. A meaningful public debate would set out just how dependent Britain really is on immigrants to staff health and social care and do jobs that not enough British people want to do. It would make the point that immigration does put pressure on public services, but also relieves it by staffing the NHS and care services. People can see for themselves that Take Back Control was a bad joke. They need to be included in grown-up conversations about the trade-offs involved. Getting the numbers down is an exercise in balancing benefits and disadvantages. The riots that have disfigured many English towns show what happens when one-sided anti-immigrant sentiment takes hold. In the interests of the country's economy and well-being, Labour should reframe this woeful debate and start telling a more balanced story about the pros of immigration as well as the cons. The Tories have been living a lie about it for years. Labour must break the cycle. That report was by Rebecca McQuillan.
The Herald on the 16th of August and the Voices section. Is closure of 2 private schools something to worry about? By James McKinney. This week we've been reporting that 2 of Scotland's private schools are closing down for good. First up was Cedars School in Greenock, which we started hearing rumours about at the end of last week. It's a very small Christian school that was first established in 1999 by Struthers Memorial Church, but will now formally close on Friday 27th of September. On the same day that this news was breaking, Kilgraston School in Perthshire, the country's own Catholic boarding school, and one which catered exclusively to girls in the senior phase, announced that its doors are now permanently closed. Opponents of Labour's plans to introduce VAT on private school fees have been quick to jump on both closures, an example of the terrible damage that's going to be done in the pursuit of what they like to call the politics of envy. The truth is a bit different. Cedars School has been struggling to attract pupils for some time, and last year had just 76 of them. Even when full, however, it had a capacity for 120 pupils across primary 1 to S6. It had to increase fees by 10% recently following a review of its financial position, and even had to make some staff redundant. As for Kilgraston School, it almost closed a year ago due to financial problems. It was only saved at the last minute by the fact that parents were able to raise more than £1 million in 48 hours. The real rescue plan, however, involved the sale of the school to a Chinese-owned business, and that has now collapsed. As a result, it's been decided that the school has no choice but to close. Even without the Labour's VAT plans, it's not at all clear that Kilgraston or Cedars would have survived for much longer. But whatever the reasons behind them, it's undeniably the case that Scotland has seen 2 private schools announce closure in the same week. The question, however, is whether or not this is a particular problem. The most obvious issue with private schools closing is that the pupils need to go somewhere, and this raises potential logistical issues. People sometimes assume that every pupil leaving a private school will end up in the state sector. But that's unlikely to be even close to true, and many will find themselves enrolled in another private institution instead. Obviously, if every single private school closed down at once, it would cause problems, because even if state schools do have room for nearly 30,000 more children and young people, the demand would not be evenly spread across the country. There are parts of Scotland that probably wouldn't even notice if every private school disappeared overnight, but other councils, most obviously Edinburgh, would probably find themselves in a more difficult position. But that's only in the ultra-extreme circumstances of all schools closing, or at least a very large proportion of them doing so, and that just isn't going to happen. And of course, even if it were going to happen, you'd still need to balance out the immediate negatives with the long-term positives. For example, what do we think would happen to the quality of Scottish education overall if every single parent, including all the wealthiest, most powerful and best connected people in the country, who until now decided that state provision wasn't good enough for their children, suddenly had a direct stake in the public school system? Aside from big picture concerns like this, some people are worried about the impact on individuals, especially pupils. It would be difficult not to have sympathy for young people having to cope with their school closing and quite possibly being separated from their friends on a day-to-day basis. This is especially true because it's unlikely to be pupils who close to take a risk by paying for a private school, which is, let's not forget it, a business that could fail instead of using the state system. But they'll be the ones bearing the brunt of the consequences. Those children are going to another private school or transferring into the state sector, they deserve lots of support and understanding. But that impact, it still isn't a particularly good argument against Labour's decision that VAT will apply to private school fees. At the end of the day, paying thousands and thousands of pounds a year for private schooling, whether you do so with barely a dent in your bank balance or after lots of saving and budgeting, is by definition a luxury expense, and it doesn't really make any sense to apply a lucrative tax break on such spending. That money would be better spent elsewhere. Will there be consequences of the decision? Of course. Will some of them be negative for individuals affected? Without a doubt. But that's the case when you tackle pretty much any injustice, so sometimes you just need to get on with it. And that was by James McKinney. The Herald on the 16th of August, and the Voices section. Watch out, the tech oligarchs will shape our future, by Theo Zanidis. Over the past decade or so, there's been a huge change on the world stage, one that involves billionaires, yes, yet affects us all. Traditional change makers such as media moguls and business leaders have been quietly, and in some cases not so quietly, been pushed aside by tech entrepreneurs who have taken their place as the most influential figures in global politics. These new oligarchs, emanating from Silicon Valley, are successfully influencing policy and the wider global conversation, and it's worth paying attention to. Take Peter Thiel. He's someone you might not have heard of, but you'll probably be aware of his work both professionally and in politics. Professionally, he's co-founder of PayPal. In politics, he's said to have been crucial in the selection of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate. This is particularly significant, as it's believed that Rupert Murdoch had been pushing for another candidate for that role, Doug Burgum. The fact Thiel won over such an historic power broker is not insignificant, and is a sign of a dramatic shift. Perhaps the most influential and controversial of this new breed of power brokers is Elon Musk, the widely successful billionaire behind electric vehicle brand Tesla, space exploration company SpaceX, and social media platform Twitter, or X, if you follow his rebrand of the platform. Indeed, his purchase of Twitter involved sweeping cultural changes and job cuts, reshaping the platform into what he claims is a hub for free speech. Critics, on the other hand, claim he's used the platform to advance partisan politics. Controversial figures such as self-proclaimed misogynist Andrew Tate and Katie Hopkins have been allowed to return to X from permanent bans handed down by the previous regime. False information shared on the platform has had devastating real-world consequences, such as the riots seen in Southport. Misinformation can influence elections too, and our attitude to things like climate change. Musk's ownership of X gives him unprecedented influence on top of his existing billions. It's worth pointing out that his companies have used this money for lobbying and donations to candidates from both the Republican and Democrat parties in the approach, taking a savvy, pragmatic approach to tailoring public police. It's also worth highlighting his influence in the war in Ukraine through the Starlink satellite system, and the fact he directly intervened in the conflict at one point by preventing it from being used in an attack on the Russian Navy. He said he didn't want his company to become directly involved in the war, a defense that Ukraine has been hugely critical of. The trend of tech oligarchs isn't limited to Thiel and Musk. One could point to OpenAI's Sam Altman, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon. The systems they have developed give them a new form of power that our political systems and society may not be ready for. It's a fascinating but disturbing shift, and it's one that will shape our future in ways we have limited control over. Theo Zanidis is Senior Lecturer in Digital Marketing at the University of the West of Scotland.
From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 17th of August, from the Politics section, exclusive. SNP MSPs and activists set to clash in gender-affirming care debate. This article was by Andrew Learmonth. John Swinney's first speech to the SNP conference risks being overshadowed by a row over trans healthcare. The party's LGBTQ+ wing, Out for Independence, has tabled a motion calling for the NHS to scrap the need for a psychiatric diagnosis before an adult can receive gender-affirming care. It will be the final policy discussion of a 3-day conference in Edinburgh and will take place right before John Swinney's keynote address.
The group are asking delegates to back calls for gender reaffirming care to be brought in line with all other models of healthcare for adults and operate off an informed consent model without additional need for a psychiatric diagnosis. Gender affirming care covers a range of medical interventions and support, including the prescription of hormones and, in some cases, surgery. One MSP described the motion as childish and a completely divisive issue. I was staggered to see the motion from Out for Independence, they said. Most members know the obsession with identity politics hasn't served us. Surely, before the First Minister's speech, it would have been sensible to have a debate that spoke to the general public. They also pointed to concerns raised by Dr. Hilary Cass around the quality of treatment being offered to adults with gender dysphoria, which has prompted a review of services in England. In May, the consultant paediatrician, who earlier in the year published a report on gender care for children and young people, said she had been approached by a number of clinicians working in adult gender clinics with concerns. This includes issues around consent and the use of hormones. She also said staff told her their colleagues failed to correct or challenge patients' magical thinking, i.e. unrealistic beliefs about what could be achieved through medical transition. Dr. Cass said a common concern was the very limited time for assessment and the expectation that patients would be put on hormones by their second visit. She added, the majority of patient presentations were extremely complex, with a mix of trauma, abuse, mental health diagnoses, past forensic history, ASD and ADHD, and therefore this limited assessment was inadequate. For Women Scotland said the Out for Independence motion was illiterate and ideological. Calling for access to life-altering medical procedures without a diagnosis is anti-ethical to how the NHS works and more akin to the magical thinking outlined by Dr. Cass and her concerns regarding adult gender clinics. The majority of patients present with complex problems and coexisting mental health issues, which take time to clinically assess. It is irresponsible of the SNPs to suggest sidestepping this, and it helps no one, least of all the patients they claim to speak on behalf of. A spokesperson for Out for Independence said they were disappointed that SNP MSPs were once again running to the press with internal issues rather than getting in touch with us. They added, as far as we are concerned, conference is a venue for proposing new, bold policy ideas and resolving them through a vigorous open debate. If MSPs find that open debate is not to their liking, perhaps they might reflect on whether party politics is for them. They said they vehemently disagree with the assertion that this policy proposal is either childish or serves no one. Trans people in Scotland currently have wait times of over 4 years to access basic healthcare due to gatekeeping behind specialist services and psychiatric diagnoses. As the SNP's LGBTQ+ affiliate, trans people are part of the constituency we represent, and this was a policy that was passed off at OFI's internal conference by Acclaim. We therefore have the backing of our membership to put this resolution forward. We also fail to see how proposing that we bring our standards of care for adults in line with peer nations like Canada is childish. They added, we certainly haven't been approached by any MSPs, and if the first course of action is to act in bad faith, rather than have a conversation with their affiliate, then that is their prerogative. Had they done so, they might have avoided embarrassing themselves by referencing a highly contested review of children and young people's services for different countries' separate healthcare system, when our resolution solely concerns adult care. Lastly, while we are flattered that some elected members seem to think that we have control over the timings of conference agenda, we have no input into this. They will have to take it up with whoever compelled the running order. And that report was an exclusive by Andrew Learmonth. From the Herald Scotland, Saturday the 17th of August, from the news section. Spacecom Expo Scotland set to be held in Glasgow. Report by Deputy Business Editor Scott Wright. Global leaders and industry experts from across government, defence, business and academia are set to descend on Glasgow for a major space conference next month. More than 3,000 attendees, including 70 exhibitors and 60 speakers, are expected to attend Spacecom Expo Scotland at the SEC in Glasgow on September the 11th and 12th. It will be the biggest space industry event to ever take place in Scotland. The Expo will showcase one of the UK's most dynamic growth sectors, with Scotland at the forefront of ambitions to be Europe's leading space nation. Scotland is home to more than 180 space companies, world-leading research and academic institutions, and multiple spaceports. It builds more satellites than any other country in Europe and has vertical launch ambitions before the end of 2024. A full programme of events have been lined up for the two-day conference, which will feature multiple speaker theatres, panel sessions, roundtables, workshops, and the opportunity for one-to-one networking. Keynote speakers will include Dr. Paul Bate, Chief Executive of the UK Space Agency, David Parker, Space Exploration Director of the European Space Agency, Secretary of State for Scotland Ian Murray, and Dr. Hina Khan, Executive Director of Space Scotland. The event will be hosted by Will Whitehorn, Executive Chair of Spacecom Expo and former President of Virgin Galactic. Professor Anu Odsha, Director of Champion Space at the UK Space Agency, said, "Events like Spacecom Expo Scotland play a vital role in bringing together the people and businesses who will write the next chapter in the growth story of Scotland's space sector. Glasgow is a global hub for small satellite manufacturing and data applications, while companies and universities across Scotland are playing major roles in some of the most complex and important space missions, supporting thousands of jobs. There are huge opportunities to build on these successes as we count down to the first launches from Scottish spaceports, catalyse investment from all over the world, and deliver new space missions and capabilities that benefit the whole of the UK." Tom Arthur, Investment Minister for the Scottish Government, said, "I'm delighted that Spacecom Expo is coming to Scotland. It's a fantastic endorsement of the country's rapidly growing space industry and a great opportunity to showcase the talent, innovation and facilities it has to offer. Scotland is open for business, and the Scottish Government is committed to help unlock further opportunities, investments and collaborations to support this hugely exciting and strategically important sector." And that report was written by Scott Wright. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 18th of August, from the news section, man arrested after alleged assault on St Johnstone's supporters liaison officer. Report by Gabriel Mackay. A 22-year-old man has been arrested and charged following an incident ahead of the Rangers vs St Johnstone match at Hampden Park in Glasgow. Videos circulating online appear to show the visitors' supporters liaison officer being attacked and a young man running away with her drum before the Premier Sports Cup fixture on Saturday. Police Scotland have now confirmed that a 51-year-old woman was assaulted and had a St Johnstone supporter's drum taken from her. She did not require hospital treatment. A 22-year-old man has been arrested and charged and is due to appear at Glasgow Sheriff Court on Monday 19th of August 2024 in connection with the robbery. As officers were responding to the incident, a disturbance took place which resulted in two further men, aged 16 and 21, being arrested in connection with breach of the peace offences and resisting arrest. Both were charged and released on an undertaking to appear before the Glasgow Sheriff Court at a later date. St Johnstone said in a statement, "We are aware of an incident involving one of our club employees prior to today's Premier Sports Cup match against Rangers at Hampden Park. We are working with Rangers Football Club, Police Scotland, the SPFL and the SFA with an active investigation now underway. The club can make no further comment at this time." And that report was written by Gabriel Mackay and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald, Monday the 19th of August, from the sports section. Lewis Ferguson issues injury update as Scotland star returns to grass. Report written by Robbie Hanratty. Lewis Ferguson is making significant progress in his recovery from a serious knee injury as he took his first steps on grass since enduring the setback which sidelined him from participating at Euro 2024. The former Aberdeen and Hamilton academical midfielder was seen engaging in light training with his teammate Dan Udoyi on Monday morning. Currently serving as the captain of Bologna, Ferguson missed the final matches of last season in Serie A due to cruciate ligament damage sustained in April. With Bologna finishing 5th in the Italian league, he is racing against time to be fit for their upcoming Champions League campaign. Delivering an update on Instagram, the Scottish international said, "Work, work, work. Finally back on the pitch too." Ferguson's social media post included multiple pictures showcasing him on the field again, participating in a kit photo shoot, performing rehabilitation exercises with the medical staff, and enjoying a view of the Stadio Renato Dall'Ara while observing his team from the stands. In other news, Ferguson's Scotland teammate, Kieran Tierney, is also battling to reach full fitness again after returning from this summer's European Championship with a hamstring injury. Tierney, who sustained a setback during a Group A match against Switzerland on June the 19th, finds himself behind Alexander Zinchenko, Takehiro Tomiyasu, Urien Timber, Jakub Kiwori and a new signing Riccardo Calafiori in the pecking order for the left-back position under Mikel Arteta. So, despite it being clear that the 27-year-old's future lies away from the Emirates Stadium, Arteta was eager to emphasise that he has his duty to ensure the defender makes a full recovery amid continued transfer speculation. He needs to focus on recovering in the best possible way. It's been a tough time for him again with the last injury, the Arsenal manager said when asked about Tierney's recovery. We have to try to support him and make sure he gets back fit. And that article was written by Robert Hanratty. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 19th of August, from the sports section. Rangers ban 4 fans following incident prior to St Johnstone match. Report by sports writer Robert Hanratty. Rangers have issued indefinite bans for 4 fans in response to an incident that occurred before the Premier Sports Cup match against St Johnstone. Prior to the game at Hampden Park on Saturday afternoon, a 51-year-old woman, who serves as a supporter liaison officer for the Perth club, was assaulted and robbed of a possession. Police Scotland reported that a 22-year-old man had been arrested and charged in connection with the incident. Additionally, 2 more arrests were made following a separate disturbance that erupted shortly after the initial event. A Rangers spokesperson confirmed the details on Monday. They said, Rangers can confirm it has issued indefinite bans to 4 individuals as inquiries continue following the incident outside Hampden Park on Saturday. Rangers has reached out to the St Johnstone employee to check on their well-being and to apologise on behalf of the club. We abhor and condemn all incidents like this in the strongest terms and continue to support Police Scotland with their ongoing investigation. The woman who was targeted provided an update on X stating, "Thank you for all your support and kindness. #humbled." An article written by Robert Hanratty.
From Herald Scotland, Monday 19th of August 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Head teachers in Scottish schools to be given power to ban phones. Do you agree? Article by Josh Carmichael. Head teachers will be able to ban mobile phones in schools, but the Scottish Government does not intend to bring in a nationwide ban on the devices in classrooms. A Scotland-wide ban on the devices in schools is not considered to be appropriate or feasible, new guidance from ministers has stated. It comes as Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth said there are undoubtedly growing behavioural issues associated with mobile phones. As a result, she said the guidance makes clear head teachers will be empowered to take action up to and including whole school bans, where they believe this to be necessary. However, the Education Secretary said, the Scottish Government does not intend to dictate approaches to our head teachers. They know better than anyone the specific approach which will work best in their school. Ms Gilruth, a former modern studies teacher, stressed she would support any head teacher who decides to institute a ban on mobile phones in their school. But she insisted, This decision is one which rests with Scotland's head teachers who know their pupils and their staff and who we trust to take the best decision in the interests of the school communities. And that article was by Josh Carmichael. There was a poll available to express your views on this, and it's now closed. In response to the question, should mobile phones be banned from Scottish schools, 87% said yes, 14% said no. From Herald Scotland, Monday 19th August 2024. From the STEM section of the business section. Raw dogging social media craze is just plain stupid. Article by Alan Simpson. Anyone who has ever travelled on a long-haul flight know they are probably the most boring things ever invented, even with the myriad of in-flight entertainment packages on offer. Being stuck in a metal box 36,000 feet in the air for more than 10 hours can do strange things to your mind, as there's not really an awful lot you can do to pass the time. A game of French cricket down one of the aisles would be an absolute hoot, as would a first-class economy game of rugby. But I'm not sure the cabin crew would take too kindly to it, particularly if the flight crew left their posts in the cockpit to join in. Next goal scorer gets to fly the plane is a phrase that none of us really want to hear as we cruise high above the shark-infested waters of the Indian Ocean. Knowing my luck, I'd probably score an own goal, trying to get out of the way before being ushered into the cockpit by a laughing captain and handed his pilot's hat. Thankfully, in real life it's far more orderly, and we have to instead just contend with a variety of films and good books to while away the hours. But it appears that this is not enough for the social media-obsessed generation, who have now taken stupidity and attention-seeking to a whole new level. There is now apparently a new travel trend known as raw dogging, where passengers spend long hours mid-air just staring straight ahead. The longer you do it, the tougher you have allegedly proven yourself to be. Some also avoid eating or drinking, and some even say they won't get up at all, even to use the toilet. Increasing numbers of young men, and it is mostly athletic-looking young men, are posting videos of themselves on board, staring at the in-flight map or the safety instructions card, vowing to use the power of the mind to get them through. Manchester City striker Erling Haaland recently joined the trend, posting that he had got through a 7-hour flight with no phone, no sleep, no water, no food, and had found it easy. But health experts warn that more extreme versions of the trend can pose serious risks. The term raw dogging may have rather dubious origins, but increasingly it is used for anything being done without protection or support. For these men, the appeal seems to be the opportunity to prove their resilience and self-control. But Dr. Jill Jenkins, a GP who also works as a medical escort in air ambulance work, told the BBC, "They're idiots. The whole thing about the risk of long-haul flying is that you're at risk of dehydration. If you're not moving, you're at risk of deep vein thrombosis, which is compounded by dehydration. It's hard to disagree with the good doctor on this one, but it shows the lengths that some people will go to in order to gain a few likes on social media. Plus, photographing yourself with a mobile phone while actually doing it means you've already failed the task anyway." Haaland could also find himself being disciplined, as I'm sure the club doctors and nutritionists will have laid out an in-flight plan for the squad to follow, which he has clearly ignored. Being bored on a plane is no cause for celebration and is not heroic. Anyone who has ever flown with a toddler can testify to that. And that article was written by Alan Simpson. From the Herald Scotland, Monday 19th August 2024. From the STEM section of the business section. I'm sick of egomaniacal Twitter users declaring their departure. Article by Kevin McKenna. We're in the middle of the social media flouncing season. These spells occur haphazardly and sporadically, like small dust storms, and feature groups of people leaving the social media site Twitter, X. It's not sufficient, however, that they merely depart from the micro-blogging host. They seem to have an overwhelming urge to tell everyone that they're leaving. This is often accompanied by long, tedious, and egomaniacal explanations conveyed in multi-tweet form, why their conscience can't permit their continued presence on this platform. I've noticed too that some of them only discover the immorality of Twitter because they've been told there's a problem. It unfolds like this. There they are, declaiming and pontificating about matters of which they know little, when, all of a sudden, someone posts a message that they don't like. Then someone else says that Elon Musk, the owner of the site, has created a subliminal mind virus in which the unwary are stealthily turned into racists, transphobes, and Islamophobes. Obviously, the designer progressives can't be seen to be endorsing any of this, and so they distance themselves from it by describing Twitter X as a hellscape. This is so no one can be in any doubt that they don't actually approve of the hellscape and are only posting on it with extreme reluctance. Then a social conflagration happens, like the English race riots, and Mr. Musk is accused of having personally conducted the orchestra of hate by permitting some bad people to be unpleasant and beastly. Now, it's not enough to dismiss Twitter X as a hellscape. The hellscape must be abandoned, lest they too become infected. It matters not a jot that many of those who take part in the seasonal Grong Flounce have spent the last few years organising virtual firing squads to marginalise and harass people for articulating their views. Sometimes they have even demanded that these people lose their jobs and are shunned by polite society. Lost in the post. Only very occasionally do I post anything on Twitter X. This is because I've reached that stage in my life when I'm no longer as certain about my positions on several issues as I once was. I'm in awe of those many people who take to social media to declaim and pronounce verily on subjects as though this is the last word on the matter. I'd love to have their confidence. That said, I find Twitter X to be very uplifting an environment. Why, just this week, I've seen footage of a snake and a crocodile having a square go in a river, with a commentator describing the action as though it were a boxing match. I've seen someone rescuing a baby goldfinch and appealing for advice on what to do next. Occasionally, I've seen killer whales solve complicated algebra equations in their heads and organising food banks for disadvantaged orcas or those with addiction issues. My favourite Twitter X accounts are The Cultural Tutor and All the Right Movies. Last week, The Cultural Tutor told me that the highest paid athlete in history was a Roman charioteer called Gaius Apuleius Diocles, whose career winnings were the equivalent of £15 billion. All the Right Movies posts brilliant threads about the behind-the-scenes mayhem and bacchanals that went on during the making of brilliant movies. At least one a week, there are appeals by Police Scotland seeking Twitter X's help in finding missing persons. On my timeline, by a factor of 10 to 1, posts that are life-affirming and joyous, such as found footage of Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin playing an early concert in Scandinavia, easily outnumber the beastly content. And if ever I have the urge to snap at someone, or just to be a smartass, I just go to one of the many Celtic accounts I follow to watch old videos of Kenny Dalglish and the Lisbon Lions. Cybernat nonsense. I've also noticed, on my timeline anyway, that it's usually the SNP glove puppets who are first to take events and to announce that they've had enough of the hellscape. These are the ones who, at the merest criticism of their party or Nicola Sturgeon, will accuse you of being a Yoon or a Red Tory. They will sally into any geopolitical fray at the drop of an unshaka or a cafe, but only after first checking who else is getting involved. Many of them do this, yet have remained silent as it's become known that their party has become a hellscape of sexual abuse, where complaints by women about harassment and violent threat are routinely ignored. So accustomed have the SNP's officer class become to having their views unquestioned that they are now resentful when Scotland's unkempt rank and file use social media platforms to voice criticisms of the politicians they elected. Before social media, Scotland's political elites were protected from trenchant criticism by newspaper letters editors. Only a handful of the politest and most learned missives were given the house room. Glasgow's G12 gendarmerie now routinely use the term fascist to dismiss people who haven't signed up fully to their psycho-sanctimony. They appoint themselves judge, jury and executioner and consider themselves alone to be the arbiters of the nation's morals. There is no reasoning with them, there is no debate, and there is no right of appeal. In this scenario, I only see one group exhibiting fascist-like behaviour. Fringe benefits. Next Saturday afternoon, I'm to be interviewed on stage at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. This is a sentence that I'm ashamed to have written, having vowed never to participate in this bacchanal of middle-class smugness. As the interviewer is an old friend and colleague, Graham Spears, I have decided to make an exception. That, and the fact the organisers have agreed to pay a small donation, in lieu of my fee, to For Women Scotland, the wonderful campaigning group which protects women and children's rights. I can't bring myself to provide any more details than that because the ticket price is a bit steep for my liking, and I can't really guarantee that it will be worth the outlay. If you do decide to come along, you will be most welcome, but if I were you, I wouldn't be cancelling anything important. And that article was written by Kevin McKenna. From Herald Scotland, Monday 19th of August 2024, from the STEM section of the business section. Watch out, the tech oligarchs will shape our future. By Theo Tsanidis. Over the past decade or so, there's been a huge change on the world stage, one that involves billionaires yet affects us all. Traditional change-makers such as media moguls and business leaders have been quietly, and in some cases not so quietly, been pushed aside by tech entrepreneurs who have taken their place as the most influential figures in global politics. These new oligarchs, emanating from Silicon Valley, are successfully influencing policy and the wider global conversation, and it's worth paying attention to. Take Peter Thiel. He's someone you might not have heard of, but you'll probably be aware of his work both professionally and in politics. Professionally, he's co-founder of PayPal. In politics, he's said to have been crucial in the selection of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate. This is particularly significant, as it's believed that Rupert Murdoch has been pushing for another candidate for that role, Doug Burgum. The fact Thiel won over such an historic power broker is not insignificant and is a sign of a dramatic shift. Perhaps the most influential and controversial of this new breed of power brokers is Elon Musk, the wildly successful billionaire behind electric vehicle brand Tesla, space exploration company SpaceX, and social media platform Twitter, or X, if you follow his rebrand of the platform. Indeed, his purchase of Twitter involves sweeping cultural changes and job cuts, reshaping the platform into what he claims is a hub for free speech. Critics, on the other hand, claim he's used the platform to advance partisan politics. Controversial figures such as self-proclaimed misogynist Andrew Tate and Katie Hopkins have been allowed to return to X from permanent bans handed down by the previous regime. False information shared on the platform has had devastating real-world consequences, such as the riots seen in Southport. Misinformation can influence elections too, and our attitude to things like climate change. Musk's ownership of X gives him unprecedented influence, on top of his existing billions. It's worth pointing out that his companies have used this money for lobbying and donations to candidates from both the Republican and Democrat parties in the approach, taking a savvy, pragmatic approach to tailoring public policy. It's also worth highlighting his influence in the war in Ukraine through the Starlink satellite system, and the fact he directly intervened in the conflict at one point by preventing it from being used in an attack on the Russian Navy. He said he didn't want his company to become directly involved in the war, a defence that Ukraine has been hugely critical of. The trend of tech oligarchs isn't limited to Thiel and Musk. One could point to OpenAI's Sam Altman, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon. The systems they have developed give them a new form of power that our political systems and society may not be ready for. It's a fascinating but disturbing shift, and it's one that will shape our future in ways we have limited control over. And that article was by Theo Tsanidis, a senior lecturer in digital marketing at the University of the West of Scotland.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 20th of August 2024, from the business section. New BAE Shipbuilding Training Academy opens in Glasgow. This article is by Jodie Harrison. A new state-of-the-art shipbuilding facility in Scotland's largest city will ensure the vital industry thrives for generations, its owners have said. BAE Systems have opened a new £12 million applied shipbuilding academy at its Scotstoun shipyard to train a new workforce from new starters to senior leaders. The academy will be a key training facility for all the apprentices and graduates in the company's naval ships business and will provide lifelong learning and skills development activities for around 4,500 employees. The academy comprises a modern trade hall and a flexible learning hub, offering a high-quality, hands-on training environment where learners are fully immersed in realistic ship mock-ups. The adjacent hub houses over 30 teaching spaces, a cutting-edge science, technology, engineering and maths innovation lab, an exhibition area, and conference space. The investment is being put in place to ensure that current and future employees reach their full potential in priority areas for the shipbuilding and maritime industry. Scotland's shipbuilding is currently experiencing a mini boom, with the size of its workforce growing to 6,700 recorded in 2021. The industry remains a £1 billion sector, turning over £1.022 billion that year. Paul Feely, Academy and Engineering Director, BAE Systems Naval Ships Business, said the new training facility will help secure a strong future talent pipeline as the industry continues to grow in the coming years. He said the Applied Shipbuilding Academy is an extraordinary innovation centre that will enable outstanding learning across our entire workforce. Investing in our people and harnessing the latest technological advancements is fundamental to our mission, enabling us to deliver on the national endeavour that is the Type 26 programme and future projects. This commitment ensures that we can equip navies worldwide with a decisive competitive edge for generations to come. The Academy in Glasgow is BAE Systems' third dedicated training facility, which follows similar investments in both Salisbury and Barrow-in-Furness in the northwest of England. The company employs thousands of people across Scotland in diverse jobs, including at its naval ships business in Glasgow, manufacturing facilities at Hill End, regional aircraft operations in Prestwick, and at RAF Lossiemouth. The new Academy's facilities use the knowledge and experience of the company's training staff to provide a modern learning environment for BAE Systems' near 40,000 strong workforce across the UK. The new facilities, together with a range of additional investments in technologies and equipment, form an overall £300 million investment in BAE Systems' 2 shipbuilding sites in Glasgow over the next 5 years. The opening of the Academy comes as construction of the Janet Harvey Hall, a cutting-edge new shipbuilding facility in Govan, remains well underway. Once complete, this 170-metre long and 80-metre wide structure will provide the space and services for BAE Systems to build 2 frigates side by side, and will help enable efficient and safe shipbuilding for decades to come, with future work unaffected by adverse weather. BAE says these investments are key elements in the modernisation and digitalisation of both the Govan and Scotstoun yards, supporting the delivery of the 8 Type 26 frigates ordered by the Royal Navy, as well as potential future orders. Analysis of the latest government figures shows that the Scottish shipbuilding sector employed 0.36% of Scotland's total workforce, with an estimated 6 ships built over the course of a year, all of which were either workboat or fishing vessels. In November 2022, the UK Ministry of Defence awarded BAE Systems a £4.2 billion contract to build 5 more Type 26 frigates for the Royal Navy in Glasgow. These frigates are part of the City class and will be anti-submarine warfare ships. The first of the Batch 2 ships, HMS Birmingham, was announced in September 2018, and the remaining ships are HMS Sheffield, HMS Newcastle, HMS Edinburgh, and HMS London. The first ship, HMS Glasgow, is currently being outfitted and is expected to undergo sea trials in 2026. The Navy is expected to receive the remaining frigates between 2028 and 2035. Rod Patterson, Chief Executive Officer, National Shipbuilding Office, said, "The BAE Systems Applied Shipbuilding Academy is a fantastic, enduring commitment which will develop a pipeline of skilled workers fit for the future. I look forward to the contribution the Academy will make to creating a highly skilled workforce and our national shipbuilding capabilities. It is excellent to see the vision become a reality." That article was by Jodie Harrison. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 20th of August 2024, from the business section. Work starts on over 140 new homes at landmark Scottish site. This article is by Brian Donnelly. Work has started on more than 140 new homes in a Scottish city. The energy-efficient, social and mid-market rent properties will include 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes across the site. The City of Edinburgh Council said the Silver Lee development is part of the £1.3 billion Granton waterfront regeneration, which will create a new residential-led mixed-use community and will deliver around 3,500 net zero carbon homes, a primary school, a health centre, commercial and cultural space, and a new coastal park. In partnership with Cruden, work will include upgrades to green space and the main footpath linking Salverson Crescent and Marine Drive to create safer, easier access to the shorelines. Plans also include a new pavilion for Craig Royston Community Football Club. Fraser Lyons, Managing Director of Cruden, said, "Silverlea is a great example of development with sustainability and community at its heart, and we are thrilled to be involved in the delivery of this transformational project. The City of Edinburgh Council must be commended in bringing forward these much-needed social and mid-market homes amid the capital's housing emergency, and for specifying them to net zero carbon standards, making them greener, cleaner, and more efficient to heat and run." That article was by Brian Donnelly. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 20th of August 2024, from the Voices section. Scottish economy good news. Labour wants Tory millstones. This article is by Ian McConnell. The last week has seen some welcome reassurance on a couple of quite different fronts. Royal Bank of Scotland's latest growth tracker report highlighted a rebound in the expansion rate of the private sector economy north of the border in July, and good progress on several other key measures, after an unexpected sharp slowdown in expansion in June. And a trading update from TUI provided some welcome confirmation that the UK's overseas travel sector continues to enjoy strong demand, even though the macroeconomic backdrop is dismal and there is little room for hope of significantly better times ahead, in spite of Labour's spin on this front. The package holiday giant and airline reported its highest ever revenues for any April to June period, the third quarter of its financial year. Revenues for the quarter were €5.8 billion, up by 9.5% on the same period a year earlier. TUI declared bookings taken for summer 2024 had strengthened since its last update in May, supported by accelerated momentum in recent weeks at robust prices. It added that, following the sale of 88% of the season, bookings are up 6%, with the average selling price also ahead by 3%. And TUI revealed early signs for winter 2024-25 bookings are promising across our source markets. TUI reported that it had, since its last update in May, added 4.3 million bookings, achieving a total of 13.3 million for the season to date. It revealed that the UK is 90% sold for the season, with bookings up 5%. Andy Cliff, Chief Executive of Glasgow Airport owner AGS, has made much of the importance of rebuilding connectivity in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, and highlighted how crucial this is to the regional economy. He is absolutely right to do so. And the indication from TUI that consumers are continuing to prioritise overseas travel, even in these tough times, is good news in this context. There have been many other encouraging signs, including the buoyancy of demand for Emirates' route between Glasgow and Dubai, a key hub for myriad long-haul destinations. Returning to the Scottish economy, the acceleration of private sector growth in July saw the nation ranked 5th among the 12 UK nations and regions in Royal Bank's growth tracker last week. This closely watched survey also revealed that the private sector economy in Scotland last month enjoyed an acceleration in employment growth and a rise in optimism in terms of expectations of increased activity on a 12-month horizon. The private sector economy north of the border also recorded a renewed upturn in new business inflows. The headline Business Activity Index for Scotland, which measures combined services and manufacturing output, rose to 52.7 last month, from 51.9 in June on a seasonally adjusted basis, coming in above the level of 50 deemed to separate expansion from contraction for a 7th consecutive month. As observed in my column in the Herald last Wednesday, Scotland's economy is not firing on all cylinders, with the expansion in July driven again by the dominant services sector as manufacturing output fell again. However, given the sharpness of the slowdown in June, the latest growth tracker findings are most welcome, especially given the aforementioned difficult UK economic backdrop. Separately, last week, the EY ITEM Club think tank more than doubled its forecast of growth in Scotland this year from the 0.4% it had projected a quarter ago to 0.9%. EY said that Scotland's economic recovery is gaining momentum, suggesting fertile conditions for growth, but pace remains anemic. The EY ITEM Club's latest expansion projection for Scotland trails its forecast of 1.1% growth in the UK as a whole this year. However, in reality, this difference of 0.2 percentage points is not great, and as the scale of the upward revision to the Scottish growth forecast for this year shows, things can change fairly quickly. The key thing that can be taken from the EY ITEM Club forecasts is that growth in the UK as a whole is expected to be weak again this year. It is a demoralising state of affairs. My column last Wednesday observed, Labour, while its attempt to boost house building and its plan to improve employment rights after so many years of Tory rule are both welcome, does not come up with anything that would suggest it can deliver a meaningful boost to UK growth. In fact, it has hemmed itself in on two key fronts. It has shunned rejoining the European single market, something that would, if it were achieved, provide an enormous boost to growth. Labour has also pledged to stick to the Tory fiscal rules, limiting its capacity to stimulate growth through investment and thereby boost tax revenues. Given the size of Labour's lead in the polls ahead of the July 4th general election, and the dire performance by the Conservatives between them taking power in 2010 and losing it this summer, it remains truly baffling why Sir Keir Starmer and his new government felt they had to weigh themselves down with these two huge Tory millstones. That article was by Ian McConnell.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Pure Review and to tell your friends about our service.